Okay, so this lecture is going to be on Austria, the Empire of Austro-Hungary on the eve of World War I. And what you're looking at right now is a map of Europe in 1914 with the alliances that the countries formed, and that is part of your homework over the weekend is to watch the other video on the system of alliances. But from what you can see right now, we've got the Triple Entente, which is United Kingdom, France, Russia, and quite a few other countries. And then the Central Powers. Or what's also known as the Triple Alliance. So the Central Powers end up being Germany, Austria-Hungary, and then part of the Ottoman Empire, or the Ottoman Empire, excuse me. So what we're going to focus on is Austria-Hungary, and some of their characteristics on the eve of World War I helped them to choose their allies in Germany and the Ottoman Empire. So that's going to be our focus for today. So here we have the portrait of Emperor Franz Joseph, who was the emperor of the Austro-Hungarian Empire on the eve of World War I. And from our conversation earlier this week, he became emperor at age 18. And by the time World War I started, he was 84 years old. So he was emperor for a very long time. Before World War I broke out, he was in power for so long, mostly because he was very popular. So that kind of helped play into his role in the empire in World War I. I'd like to draw your attention to the italicized words at the bottom of this slide. So we've got the Czechs, the Slovaks, the Poles, the Croats, and the Bosnians, and those would be different ethnic groups within the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So from the map, you can see it's a map of the different ethnic groups in 1910, so a couple years before World War I breaks out. And you can see that they have quite a few different ethnic groups. There are the Austrians, the Hungarians. There's some red that kind of signifies some like people with German identity. Got some Italians, Romanians, just lots of different ethnic groups. And the reason that's important is that they all had different cultures, different languages, and different religions. So did not get along very well, but they're all a part of this empire, and that's going to come into play later on. So we'll start with the government. So the government of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So they're actually, it had a parliamentary system elected by male citizens. So Austria, but what's kind of special about it is that Austria had its own parliament and Hungary had its own parliament. So there were two parliaments within the empire, but they actually had very little real power. The true ruler who had the power was the emperor, so Emperor Franz Joseph. And again, he was very popular, but he's very elderly, so he's 84 years old when war breaks out. And again, power within the empire is split. The Austrians were in charge of one section and the Hungarians were in charge of the other. So the only thing really uniting people was the emperor. Moving on to the economy, so Austro-Hungarian Empire was pretty backwards on the eve of World War I. They were starting to industrialize, but really only a few places were industrialized, especially compared to countries like Britain and Germany and France. In addition, most people were very poor. The population was growing, but there weren't many opportunities, and as a result, many people were leaving for the United States. So if you kind of picture in the early 1900s, immigrants coming through Ellis Island, a lot of them were from Eastern Europe or the Balkan region, which is this area in the world. So again, lots of people leaving the empire to go to the United States because many people were very poor, the population's growing, and there just aren't a lot of opportunities for people. There were not a lot of opportunities. Now, the social structure is kind of a large reason why World War I starts. So the empire has many different ethnic groups, as you can see from the map. And again, they all spoke different languages, different customs. There were several different religions like Islam, Christianity, Eastern Orthodox, Judaism, but they don't get along very well in this area of the world. And again, there's very little to unite the groups except for loyalty to the emperor. So the one thing holding them all together is their aging emperor, Franz Joseph. Now, this kind of helps lead to some of their major internal problems. So again, you can see that there's a lot of different ethnic groups. Many of the groups inside the empire just want to break away and start their own country. So an example would be the Czechs, the Slovaks, the Poles. So they all want to move away and break their own country. break away and start their own country. So, for example, today, like about 100 years later, we've got Czechia, formerly known as like Czechoslovakia or the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Poland. So that's kind of an example of newish countries formed by these ethnic groups. And then there are other two groups really wanted to join an existing country. So you can see at the bottom of the map, Serbia is its own separate country, and it was this tiny country sandwiched between two large empires. So the Austro-Hungarian Empire is fairly large, and then to the right of Serbia, you can't see it on the map, but the Ottoman Empire had control of a large area of land. So for hundreds of years, Serbia was sandwiched between these two empires, and they felt threatened by it, and they were constantly looking for ways to become more powerful, stronger. And one of those ways was to add more people and land to their country. So they were looking to add the Bosnians and the Croats to their country, and there were some people in Bosnia and the Croatia-Slavonia area that wanted to join Serbia. So again, some of those ethnic groups wanted to start their own countries, and some wanted to join other existing countries. Now, on top of that, Emperor Franz Joseph, again, was 84 on the eve of World War I. So he's getting very old and increasingly frail. And he had an heir. He chose his nephew, Franz Ferdinand, to take over the empire when he passed away. The only problem is Franz Ferdinand was not very popular. So the heir to the throne was not very popular. And then we get to the major external problems. And again, it goes back to some of the stuff that was happening inside the country was also impacted by the external problems. So again, going back to Serbia, there were a lot of neighboring countries that wanted to take some of the Austro-Hungarian Empire's land. So again, Serbia wants to take some of the land from the Austrian Empire. Another thing is that they were fairly new to Europe, the empire, so they recognized that other countries didn't respect them as much. They kind of had a weaker economy. They weren't as industrialized. They weren't as powerful. They didn't have a lot of colonies, so they're kind of aware that other countries don't really respect them, and they want that respect. The final external problem is that Russia, again, their number one goal is to get a warm water port. So Russia wants a warm water port. They see an opportunity in helping smaller ethnic groups break away from Austro-Hungary, and as a way to help Russia manipulate those smaller countries and let them get access to a warm water port. So Russia wants to help these smaller ethnic groups break away, form their own countries in the hopes that Russia could control those countries and then have access to, you can see the Adriatic Sea is that body of blue water, which leads to the Mediterranean, which leads to the Atlantic Ocean. So they're hoping to kind of get access to water in that way. And so Russia, of course, is not going to get along with the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which helps set up some of the alliances. Again, Russia's not going to want to be friends with Austro-Hungarian Empire. They're going to support any of the smaller countries that want to break away from the Austro-Hungarian Empire, again, just so that they can have access to the warm water ports. Right, so that wraps it up with the Austro-Hungarian Empire and our final country to look at for the eve of World War I.